They say a man cannot see what happens behind his back. But what if he is blind? And worse still, what if his own wife is the one holding the knife meant for his heart? Long ago, in a rich and mighty city in West Africa, there lived a man named Mr. Edward Okeke, a billionaire known far and wide. His mansion stood like a palace on a hill, its golden gate opening only to the wealthy and powerful. But despite his money, Edward's heart was heavy. He had been married for 12 years to a woman named Vanessa, a beautiful woman with smooth skin like cocoa butter and a smile that could fool even the gods. Their wedding had been the event of the decade, with dancers from 3 countries and gold plates at the dinner tables. Yet, no child had come from their union. Every month, Edward hoped. Every year, he prayed. But the house remained quiet, no cries of a newborn, no little feet running down the marble stairs. And Vanessa? She smiled in public, but behind closed doors, her heart had grown cold. She had turned bitter and angry, blaming Edward for their childlessness, even though he never blamed her. They had only one servant. A young girl named Amora, who came from a poor village in the east. Amora was not beautiful by the world's standards, her skin was dark and always dusty, her clothes were old and torn. She wore a faded green blouse and a long brown wrapper tied around her waist. No jewelry. No shoes. Just her tired eyes and quiet smile. But her heart was clean like a new pot. She cooked, swept, washed, and served, without complaint. Even when Vanessa shouted at her, slapped her, or made her sleep outside, Amora would bow and say, "Yes, Ma." Edward always noticed. He noticed how Amora never grumbled. He noticed how she served food with both hands and respect. He noticed how she would sneak into his room to pray for him while he slept. And one day, he noticed something else. Edward started hearing whispers. His driver told him he once saw Vanessa with another man in a red car by the corner street. The chef said Vanessa had started locking her room at night, and it wasn't Edward she was locking out. Edward didn't want to believe it. But the truth has a voice louder than lies. So Edward made a decision. He told everyone, including his wife, that he had gone blind. Yes, blind. Pretending to be blind. He walked slowly, using a cane. He wore dark glasses and stared at nothing. Doctors were called. Specialists were flown in. But all the tests came back inconclusive. He said, "It is the Lord's will. If I must live the rest of my life in darkness, so be it." And just like that, Edward became a blind man. Vanessa wept at first. "My husband. My dear husband," she cried with crocodile tears. But when the weeks became months, her true colors came out like a snake shedding skin. She stopped sleeping in the same room. She started locking herself in the bathroom for hours, giggling on phone calls. Edward could hear everything. But he said nothing. Amora, the poor servant, became his eyes. She helped him walk around. She fed him. She read newspapers to him. When Vanessa traveled for business trips with her mystery man, it was Amora who cared for him. One day, Vanessa came home drunk. She didn't know Edward was sitting in the corner of the room. She was laughing on the phone. "My husband," she scoffed. "That blind bat. Useless man. Can't give me a child, can't see, can't even satisfy a woman. I'll soon finish collecting his properties and leave him in the dark like a broken bulb." Edward's heart broke, but his face stayed calm. She walked past him without even noticing him there. Another day, Edward heard Vanessa and her secret lover upstairs. Amora tried to stop her, but Vanessa slapped her and said, "You're just a house girl. Know your place." A month later, Edward invited guests to the mansion. Big men and women. Government officials. Family from both sides. Vanessa wore her finest lace and heavy makeup. She smiled as she greeted people, pretending to be the loving wife of a blind billionaire. Then Edward stood up. Alone. Everyone gasped. "Where's your stick?" someone whispered. He removed his dark glasses and looked straight at Vanessa. People screamed. You can see," she cried, shaking. "Yes," Edward said calmly. "I've always been able to see. I only wanted to know who truly loved me." Silence fell like a heavy rain. Edward turned to the crowd. "I found out the truth. My wife has been cheating. She has insulted me, mocked my blindness, and mistreated the only loyal person in this house." Then he turned to Amora. "This girl here, who wore rags and ate crumbs, has shown me more love than my own wife ever did. She wiped my tears without asking for anything in return." Then he walked to Amora, and in front of everyone, he took her hand. "Amora," he said gently, "will you marry me?" Amora fell to the floor in shock. "Sir, I am just a servant." "No," he said. "You are my queen." And there, before the guest, he placed a golden ring on her finger. Vanessa was thrown out that same day, along with her bags and lies. Edward and Amora got married in a quiet, humble ceremony in his country house. He bought her new clothes, royal blue lace, gold earrings, and soft shoes made from fine leather. She still cooked his food, but now, out of love, not duty. 3 months later, Edward and Amora adopted a handsome baby boy, named Frank. Laughter returned to the mansion. And peace ruled again. 1 year later. It had been one peaceful year since Edward and Amora became husband and wife. The mansion had changed. No more screaming, no more false smiles. Edward smiled more now. Amora laughed freely. Their adopted son Frank grows, and every day felt like sunlight after a long storm. But Vanessa was not done. No, she wasn't done. After being thrown out, Vanessa lost everything. Her secret lover abandoned her when he saw she had no access to Edward's wealth anymore. She lived in a small, dirty apartment and sold fake designer bags at the roadside. Her anger grew like fire. Every night, she stared at her cracked mirror and whispered, "That girl, that rat, stole my life." She wanted revenge. Not just words, blood. One sunny afternoon, Amora was returning from the hair salon down the street. It was her first time doing something for herself since she became a wife. Her hair was braided in long black twists with gold beads, and she wore a simple but elegant white gown with sandals. She carried a small purse and hummed a worship song. She didn't know 2 men were following her in a black tinted car. They waited until she walked past an empty area, an old abandoned bus stop covered in tall grass. Suddenly, the car pulled up. The men jumped out, faces hidden, holding sharp machetes. "Get her!" Amora screamed and ran. She fell. Her purse scattered. One man raised his blade, but just as he was about to strike, a motorcyclist appeared. It was a young delivery rider, who saw what was happening and began shouting, "Hey! What are you doing?" The killers panicked. One of them slashed her shoulder before escaping into the bush. The motorcycle rider quickly helped Amora up and rushed her to a nearby hospital. She lost blood, but she was safe. When Edward heard the news, his soul almost left his body. He rushed to the hospital, knelt beside her bed, and cried like a child. "God, don't take her from me. Don't take my only light." She opened her eyes slowly and whispered, "I'm not leaving you, my love." The confession of the killers. But Edward was no fool. He called his private security team and ordered an investigation. Within 3 days, the assassins were caught. And when the police questioned them under pressure, their mouths opened like broken drums. "It was a woman," one of them said. "She paid us 50,000 naira each," said the other. "She said we should make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Edward stepped forward, cold rage in his voice. What's her name? The younger assassin hesitated, then said, Vanessa. The room went silent. Vanessa was arrested in the middle of a market stall. She screamed like a madwoman. It's a lie. They are framing me. The police ignored her cries. In court, the evidence was clear: messages, recordings, payment transfers. Edward sat in the front row with Amora beside him, her arm in a sling, her face calm like still water. The judge raised his gavel and declared, Vanessa, you are guilty of conspiracy and attempted murder. You will serve 25 years in prison. She collapsed in the courtroom, wailing. After Vanessa's sentencing, peace returned again. But Amora still bore the scar on her shoulder, a reminder that not every smile is pure, and not every heart forgives so easily. Edward, standing beside her one evening, held her hand and said, You almost died because of me. But you lived, and now I live again. Amora smiled and replied, Love doesn't die easily, Edward. It only grows stronger through trials. Edward later called for the motorcyclist guy that saved Amora from the notorious boy's hand and gifted him the sum of 5 million Nigerian naira. That year, they built a foundation in her name, the Amora Hope Foundation, to support poor girls from villages, just like she once was. And so, the servant girl in faded clothes, once called just a house girl, became a queen in more than name. Not just of the mansion, but of hearts all over the land. Years later. The mansion had known peace for years now. The laughter of Frank, Edward, and Amora's adopted son echoed through the wide halls. Amora wore her long flowing wrappers with gold embroidery, now elegant but still humble, still kind. Edward, though older and slower, remained strong in spirit. But deep inside, Edward had been fighting a silent enemy. A cough here. A little chest pain there. At first, they thought it was stress or old age. But then he started coughing blood. Amora rushed him to the hospital. He was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was already too late. Edward took it like a king. He did not cry. He did not complain. He spent his final months in the garden, watching the sunrise with Amora and Frank. He told stories, gave advice, and smiled through the pain. His body grew weak, but his soul grew stronger. One night, lying on his bed with Amora beside him, he whispered, I have lived, my queen. I have seen true love. I have tasted peace. If I die today, I go with joy in my heart. She held his hand, tears rolling down her cheeks, and said, You gave me a life I never dreamed of. You gave Frank a father. You will never be forgotten. That night, Edward slept and never woke up again. The king was gone. Within 2 weeks of Edward's burial, trouble knocked at the door. His extended family, brothers, cousins, uncles who had disappeared for years, suddenly appeared at the mansion gate in big cars, wearing agbadas and dark sunglasses. They came like vultures. Where is the key to the house? We need access to his bank account. This girl can't inherit everything. She was just a house girl before. Amora was heartbroken. Frank, now 9 years old, clung to her dress as men pushed their way into the compound. They started packing furniture, opening rooms, checking land documents. One even slapped a guard who tried to stop them. We are the real blood of Edward, one of them shouted. This woman and this adopted boy have no right to our brother's wealth. Amora was shaking but calm. She said nothing. She simply picked up her phone and called Barrister Chinedu, Edward's personal family lawyer. 2 days later, the family was gathered in the mansion's large sitting room. The greedy relatives were laughing and drinking, already dividing properties in their minds. Then the lawyer arrived, wearing a black suit, holding a sealed envelope. Before anything is touched, he said, we must read the will, as instructed by the late Mr. Edward Okeke. The room went silent. He opened the envelope, cleared his throat, and began. I, Edward Chinedu Okeke, of sound mind and body, declare this to be my final and only will. The lawyer continued. To the shock of everyone, Edward had left everything. The mansion, the cars, the businesses, the lands, to his wife, Amora, and their adopted son, Frank. He wrote, "These two are not just my family, they are my heart. Anyone who touches what I've left for them touches the very legacy of my soul." Mouths dropped. The room froze. One of the cousins jumped up. "This is fake. This will is fake." Barrister Chinedu stood calmly. "I was with him when he signed it. 2 witnesses were there. It's registered in court. You can take it up if you wish, but you will lose." The men shouted. They threatened. They cursed. But they had lost. And Edward had spoken from the grave. The greedy relatives left with red eyes and empty hands. Amora, with grace and dignity, continued to run Edward's businesses with integrity. She placed Edward's portrait in every office with a plaque that read, "A man is not measured by what he has, but by who he leaves behind." Frank grew up to become a wise and kind leader. By 21, he became CEO of the Okeke Foundation, giving scholarships to poor children, just like he once was. Amora never remarried. She stayed in the mansion quietly, honoring Edward's memory. And whenever people asked her, "How did you rise from a servant to a queen?" she would smile and say, "I never planned to become rich. I only planned to be good. And God does not forget goodness."